Hello, welcome back to Karma, Destiny and Choice. Today we will be looking at an optimistic approach that many people have, entitled, Does Every Cloud Have a Silver Lining? It is my pleasure to welcome Sister Denise back with us in the studio. Hello, it's great to have you back.
Hello Magla, thank you.
So, does every cloud have a silver lining, or does it vary from person to person?
Well, first of all, I think that this adage that every cloud has a silver lining exists because it's not obvious at all. And some people are quite astute in looking at really bad situations and extracting profit from it. Not profit in the sense of taking advantage of some people's suffering, which also happens, but you can see the sort of deeper meaning behind it, and you're able to take some profit from it in terms of some understanding, some wisdom, some level of acceptance. But, you know, especially very big clouds, bad clouds, hurricanes, cyclones, all you see is devastation, human suffering, really bad things happen, sudden death, accident, your world falls apart. It's very hard to see that there's a silver lining, and it may take time to be able to extract the benefit from it, but potentially, yes, it is there.
The world is full of accounts of individuals who say that when I was diagnosed with cancer, this is the best thing that happened to me. When this happened, this negative situation unfolded in my life, this was the best thing that happened to me. One takes one's hat off to such individuals. Yes. To see the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel.
I know somebody like that. This was a person who's an Everest summiteer, so a mountain climber who had been able to get to the top of Mount Everest. He said to me, you know, climbing Mount Everest was like this. And you see that tall palm over there? I was going for a walk with him in the mountains. Getting through cancer was like that. But it took me to a state of achievement, of crossing so many internal blockages and barriers, and really finding much deeper meaning in life, and a lot of character development, a lot of deepening of the self, a lot of richness. But it was not an easy journey. So a cloud with a silver lining is not just a pretty picture. It's something that tells us something very important about how bad situations are disguised blessings.
What does it take of an individual to see the light, to see the silver lining?
One way to look at it is that this really, really bad situation highlights an area of your being which is inexperienced or weak or somehow distorted, and it becomes an instrument to force us to do very deep internal searching and reach deep into our inner resources and find something about ourselves in which we're able to reach that level that we need to be on. We're in transformational times, and the transformation involved is to go from weak to strong, to go from inexperience to experience, from not very bright to deeply wise. But the only way we can get there is by handling very big tests. And our immediate response to very big tests is this is bad, this should not be happening, this should never have happened. And even worse, if somebody makes a quip to us at that time that, oh, well, this is very good. Later on, you'll soon find out how good it is, or, oh, this is because of karma. That's not the right thing to say at such a time. A person has to go through the process, and eventually, maybe, they will say, yeah, it was destiny. I remember one man who I interviewed who lived on the front line at the siege of Sarajevo in Bosnia for 4 years. And he was a very interesting person, very spiritual man. And his main thing was that he did not want to be conscripted by the army because they would force him to pick up a gun and kill someone, and he didn't want that. But he lived on the place where the front line was, so he wanted to stay there. He had to stay there. But he was always, trying to avoid getting taken by the army of his own country. And I asked him actually about the war, and he said it was inevitable. There was no way it could be avoided, and we had to go through it. All the circumstances of the past brought us to this situation, and so you just have to accept it. So it may not be a particularly bright silver lining, but definitely to achieve this mentality of acceptance is very important, because in going from a trauma, a very bad situation, to the stage of acceptance, you have to go through a lot of stages, you have to go through a lot of inner work, and everybody sooner or later gets bereaved of someone who's really important in their lives. And whenever that happens, this process is initiated and you have to go through it. You may do it in lesser time, it may take you many years, but you have to go through it and ultimately achieve acceptance, which is a very, very advanced stage of personal development. This achievement is connected with going through bitter trials. In a way, we'd have to say it's the nature of life. People would love life to be just a bowl of cherries, but that's not the way life is.
No, it's not. What is it about us that causes us to use the words, this shouldn't be happening, when it is happening? Why are we so quick to deny?
Partly because of shock. It's a knee-jerk reaction to shock. Partly because it was not the way you expected things to be, so your expectations are not met, your assumptions are not met. It's a hard knock. There is the school of hard knocks, which is a very good school, but not a very pleasant one. It's expensive in that you have to pay by reaching to your inner resources and finding the strength to arrive at this stage of acceptance. So denial is a natural action that a person does when they just haven't reached that point. So it's connected with lack of experience of life. It's connected with just the process of going from an innocent, naive child to an experienced, mature adult, and that doesn't happen smoothly. But if it happens and you get through it, you're a better person. But you see, people believe that, pain is bad, bad things are bad. This is the culture that says that.
Okay, people believe that bad is bad. From a spiritual perspective, what is bad then? So apart from the situation itself, we label the situation, don't we?
Yes.
So we're sitting then with two problems. Why is it that we do that?
I think we'd have to say we do it because we're naive and we're inexperienced and childish, and maybe we have a bit of Peter Pan. We don't want to grow up because growing up is hard. It's like there's a fairy tale, which is something, a kind of lie that people buy into. Life should be a certain way. What should be and what is isn't the same. I think it's also connected with our sense of ethics and morality, because with ethics and morality come the modal verbs should not, ought, must, etc. And they take us away from facing things the way they are. Many people espouse ideals. They want the world to be a better place. They wish things could be perfect, and there are many things in the culture which support that illusion. It is an illusion, and the question I sometimes ask people is, what would you rather? Do you want to live in a deluded state, or do you want to go through disillusionment? Because disillusionment is a very painful emotion. But when you put those two questions together, is it better to be in a state of deludedness or illusion, or disillusioned? And, common sense says, I don't want to live a lie, I don't want to be deluded, I want the reality. But the reality can be harsh, it can be cruel, and a person equates harshness and cruelty with badness, and then they equate badness with a reality should not be bad. You see, reality should be perfect. And so people's assumptions, people's fairy tale mentality has to come crashing down. And it's the passage from childhood to maturity.
You used the phrase, when life delivers some hard knocks. When one experiences such adversity, it feels like punishment because it is punishment. Is it not?
I think there's a difference between punishment and undergoing trials. And I would put it in the category of undergoing trials, because you need to go through trials to get to the next level of your life. And your life has to go through different phases. And, rites of passage are very often also trials. In the culture of indigenous people, at a certain age, a boy will be taken out into the wilds and left alone overnight to deal with his fears and the dangers of the wild. Just being alone in the face of that. Of course, the elder is hidden away somewhere not too far so that it's not as dangerous as it feels. But this kind of rite of passage is considered essential for a boy to become a man. Or there is the Sundance. He is out there in the wild facing the harshness of the elements, the extreme sun, all of this. It's a rite of passage, it's a trial to get you to be a man. The child has a kind of ego of, oh, everything is easy and I'm in control. And they need to know that it isn't that easy and you're not in control.
Who or what is in control then?
I think what this helps us to realize is that these energies that we've been talking about, the laws of karma, are very powerful, and destiny is something that you don't know in advance. And the nature of the cycle of the world is that there's good and there's bad, there's pleasant and there's unpleasant. Life is about ups and downs, and we need to take the rough with the smooth. We have this expression, but you have to also face it in a real way and not just a theoretical. Unless a person goes through that, they can go off into horrible behaviors that are very egocentric. A person may be adult, have a lot of power, and do a lot of damage because they never went through these rites of passage that made them understand that in front of the whole universe you are really quite small.
How does one change one's attitude, stance, vision in order to equip oneself to see the best, even if a situation is very dire?
The dire situation programs you for the next dire situation. And life will bring you one dire situation after another. There are sayings which say that nothing ever happens to you that you can't handle. But people don't say that much anymore because there's so many things that happen to people that are absolutely beyond a person's capacity to manage. And so this brings up the question more and more, why are we going through such extreme situations which really undo a person? Post-traumatic stress syndrome is ubiquitous. The wars, the fleeing from dangerous places, climate change, refugees, are so very extreme hardships that people are bewildered. If you are lucky enough to get the idea that I need to fortify myself through some spiritual practice, this is going to help you. But in many ways, nothing can prepare you for what's coming down the road. Yet, when you go deep into your inner resources and when you cultivate a strong connection with the divine, this is really the only thing that will help you through it and enable you to take advantage, take the lessons, take the strengthening that those dire situations do give you.
We spoke yesterday about the fact that within the Brahma Kumaris there are some lovely expressions, and one of them that I heard many years ago went something like, whatever has happened is good, whatever is happening is better, and whatever is to happen will be the best. Is this the case, those words? And how does one apply it?
The sentence is very good. Whatever happened is good, whatever is happening is good, whatever is going to happen is even better. But you cannot arrive at really deeply understanding that without quite a lot of hindsight, because you have to process what's happening. And ultimately you will see how it led to something which is good. And this refers to one of the laws of spirituality, and that is connected with this concept of destiny that we are also looking at in this series. We've spent a lot of attention on the laws of karma because we have responsibilities. But destiny, this road that is there, that is predestined, and what you learn in spirituality is that everything in destiny is good by definition, because it is said, okay, the destiny of the world is the creation. It is said God is the creator, and whatever happens in the entire history of humanity is destiny, and everything leads to the best ultimate consequence. There's another law which plays with it, and that other law is that you only turn to God when you're in deep trouble. And the aim that people have in life is to meet God, to have the encounter with God, which takes you to ecstasy, to liberation, to the third eye being open. You see clearly everything from the beginning through the middle to the end. You have this incredible vision of the entire world. This is actually the culmination of this long journey, and it's a absolutely beautiful culmination. But along the way you go through a lot of hardships, and this is the sort of classic story that eventually it's happily ever after, but it's not happily ever after in the middle. The middle has many trials.
I'm glad you mentioned that one has to work through it to arrive at that part where you do see the benefit, because many fall into the trap of as they're dealing with the shock and the trauma and everything else, try and find the good at that stage. And you are placing emphasis on the inner work that needs to be done. That's quite relevant to seeing the silver cloud.
As you become better at doing this, the gap between the traumatic experience and seeing the silver lining in the cloud gets shorter and shorter, because your experience, you go through the process quickly, and ultimately maybe you can get to a point where in the middle of the horror you see the silver lining, but that is after a lot of work. I think people really need to bear in mind to consider themselves, okay, I'm at the beginning of my spiritual practice. It is said in India that you cannot really be a yogi until you've been practicing yoga for 50 years. That's a long time. But that's about how much time it takes to really understand this stuff. Which means you have to have perseverance, you have to have staying power, don't die along the way, keep going, you know. Because to achieve that wisdom, it takes a very long time. And sometimes people say, you know, old people are wise, but they're not always, you know. If a person is doing this kind of inner work throughout their life, by the time they get old, they may also well be very wise.
How does one go through sorrow and not allow sorrow to contaminate the soul, to poison the soul?
I think you have to deal with what is, and it may be that you go through sorrow and the sorrow contaminated the soul, and then your situation is you have to take out the contamination, because you can only deal with what is at any given moment, and then that goes into the past, because what you can do can only happen at the present. And our preparation for the future, we can be forewarned and forearmed, but most of the really difficult things that we have to go through, we just cannot predict them. If you can predict it, it's not a real test. It has to be something unexpected that you are not prepared for, because the test itself lets you know how you're doing, and it also gives you skills that you could not get otherwise.
So that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that whatever clouds exist in your life, you are able to see the silver lining in each and every one of them. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us today. We will see you again soon. Goodbye.